All the characters in the story are over 18 years old. My name is Trisha. I have been married to my husband Ben for 15 years. We've always been a typical suburban couple, except we didn't have kids. Like most couples who have been together for a long time, our lives have become somewhat routine. Mind you, it wasn't bad. It just lacked the excitement that we had when we first met. 3 years ago, my brother Steven and his wife divorced. Steven is 27 years old. He's 8 years younger than me, so we've never been very close. Steven's separation from his wife was difficult, and on the day of the divorce, he later came to our house in tears. We tried to cheer him up by having a party with just the three of us, but the alcohol only seemed to make his depression worse. We didn't let him leave and insisted that he spend the night in our guest room. The next day, Steven looked a little better, but he was still pretty depressed. Ben and I decided that we would invite Steven to spend a couple of weeks with us so that people would be with him when he was rebuilding his life. I didn't think Steven would accept our offer, but to my surprise, he did. Our life was pretty routine for a few days, until one Saturday I came home from the store. Ben was somewhere with one of his friends, and obviously Steven, who was sitting at our computer, didn't hear me come in. I quietly left the room so that Steven wouldn't hear me. Steven was supposed to attend a formal dinner for his company, but he wasn't ready for a date yet, so he was moping around trying to decide whether he should come alone. That's when Ben suggested I go with Steven. Steven replied, "Wouldn't I look even worse if I showed up with my sister? No one will know that she is your sister. They'll just think you're dating some pretty blonde. I don't know if you've noticed, Steven, but your sister is quite attractive." I'm sure I must have turned 50 shades of red at that moment. There was a moment of silence, because I don't think anyone knew what to say, except, of course, my chatty husband, who intervened. "Then it's decided. Trisha is your date on Friday night, Steven. I really kind of like the idea of dressing up." My upcoming date was a good reason to buy a brand new outfit. By the time evening came, it no longer seemed strange. Everything seemed somewhat normal when Steven and I were preparing to leave. However, when Steven opened the door for me to leave, he looked back at Ben and asked, "What time do I need to bring my date home tonight?" Ben replied playfully, "Oh, you two are just having fun. I'll leave the porch light on for you." I glared at Ben as my date took my hand and led me to his car. We arrived at the club, went inside and found our table. Dinner was nice, but I felt weird whenever Steven or someone else called me Steven's date or his girlfriend. Alcohol was served, so I was able to calm my nerves with a little wine. The band played throughout the dinner, and then after dinner the lights were dimmed and the band turned up the volume and tempo for those who wanted to dance. After a while, and after drinking some more wine, Steven asked me if I wanted to dance. I love dancing, so I readily agreed. The more we danced, the more thirsty I became. Conversely, the more wine I drank, the more I danced. At some point, I realized that Steven was becoming more open with me. Alcohol must have dulled my senses. I knew it was wrong, but wine and fun worked their magic on me. Before I knew it, the party had come to an end. Steven and I were one of the few couples left on the dance floor, and I was pretty drunk. Fortunately, at least for a while, my indiscretion stopped when the lights came back on and the music ended. When we got into Steven's car, he commented on how lucky I was to have a spouse waiting for me in bed. I apologized for letting the moment get out of hand on the dance floor. Then he added, "I wish the music wouldn't stop. It was so nice to feel someone's hand. You know, not my hand. I'm sorry, you know what I mean." I knew exactly what he meant. I was all upset and ready for my husband to have his way with me, so my feelings were overloaded and clouded my sanity. At least that's my excuse for doing the incredible thing again. "Would you like to do this with me, Trisha?" "I would like that," he replied. Around the same time, Steven found an empty parking lot that he could drive into. "This is our little secret, right?" I asked. "You know, I would never do anything to hurt you, sis," Steven replied. We made love right in the parking lot. When it was over, Steven thanked me and offered to return the favor. When we arrived at the house, Steven told us how wonderful he had had a great time. "It was the best date of my life," Steven said. "I'm sure that's how it was," I replied. "In that case, I can't wait for our second date." Steven laughed and said as we got out of his car, "You just keep waiting," I replied. "It's going to be a long, very long wait." It was after midnight when we entered the house. Ben was in bed, but still awake when I climbed in with him. I scolded Ben, telling him that I wasn't one of those wives and I wasn't going to become one of those wives. However, I confessed to making love to Stephen while drunk, telling him that it was only once. I was afraid Ben would feel disgusted, but he seemed to like it even more. Ben and I didn't say anything else. In the morning, Ben went to a golf match with one of his buddies before I got out of bed. I was experiencing conflicting feelings, and my emotions were on edge because of the events of the previous night when I was standing at the kitchen counter pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Good morning, sweetheart," Stephen said. "I could use some help again this morning," Stephen whispered. I didn't have time to answer, or maybe I didn't want to do it, or, again, maybe I didn't know how. "Follow me," Stephen said, taking my hand and leading me up the stairs to the computer room. There was a picture of me in all my glory on the computer screen. Stephen pulled me into the room and sat me down in a chair in front of the computer. "That's why I need help this morning. Your photos are the reason I need help this morning," he said. I was too caught up in Stephen in another charged situation to back off. "You are so beautiful in these photos, Trisha. I want to see you for real." "You can already see me," I replied. "Please, Trisha," he begged. "I just want to see." We made love again while my husband was away. As soon as it was over, it seemed to me that I lost consciousness for a moment. I loved what had just happened between Stephen and me, but I also felt like we had to stop it. By the time Ben returned from his golf outing, Stephen was gone. I wasn't really afraid of Ben's reaction because of how much he enjoyed last night's antics, but I wasn't completely sure. Ben quickly calmed me down. He wanted to know everything about it. Just like last night, my confession seemed to awaken the beast in Ben. For several days after that, Ben seemed eager for me to tell him more about what Stephen and I had done, but I resisted. I didn't like bullying Ben, even though he encouraged it. I didn't hear a word from Stephen until he finally called on the Thursday after our weekend. He was worried that I was mad at him, or I was in trouble with Ben because he hadn't heard from me. I assured him that neither was the case, but what I didn't tell him was that I told Ben and that Ben seemed to really like it. It was then that Stephen got to the point of his phone call, saying, "That's good, sis, because I want to ask you one more favor. I have to go to a wedding on Saturday, and I don't have a girlfriend. Are you asking me out, Stephen?" I asked. "I think so," he replied. "Besides, I had fun dancing last weekend, didn't you? Do you think Ben will mind?" "I don't think he'll mind," I said. "But if I agree and he agrees, there won't be any lovemaking this time, okay?" Stephen laughed and said, "Don't deprive yourself of all the fun, Trisha." I repeated it. "If that's what you're looking for, then you'll have to call someone else. What we did was wrong. I'm married, and I'm your sister." "I'm sorry, Trisha. Of course, this is normal. I just want to drink, dance. How about this?" Stephen replied. "Let me check with Ben, and I'll let you know." That's how I left it. When I hung up, Ben was standing there with a stupid grin on his face. "Looks like your boyfriend is coming back for more," he joked. I scolded Ben. "He's not my boyfriend. I'm going to call him back and say no." "Don't get mad. Go have a good time, and then come home." When all was said and done, Stephen picked me up for a date again. The wedding seemed to last forever because of the anticipation of the reception. No one knew me at the reception, except for a few people I met the previous weekend and who worked with Stephen. Once again, Stephen and I drank too much and behaved like a guy and a girl on the dance floor. And like last time, we got too carried away. Before I knew it, we were standing in Stephen's living room and having a nightcap. "I can't believe how beautiful you look in that dress tonight, Trisha," Stephen said. Alcohol was working against me again. Stephen and I started a slow dance in the middle of his living room. Not a word was spoken, because we both knew the question and the answer. Stephen quietly led me to his bedroom. After another session, I finally returned home to my husband around 3 o'clock in the morning. It's funny what secrets people keep from each other. I think it's not really a secret if everyone knows. Ben didn't say another word to me about me dating Stephen. We both knew that I had just been with Stephen, but not a word was said. Since that first night together, Stephen and I have been seeing each other on average about once a week. Finally, about 9 months later, I gave birth to a healthy boy who looks much more like my brother than my husband. It became obvious to me that Ben must have wanted this to be a father, but nothing was said. End.